Have your attention, please. Thanks for coming to this meeting, and I'll start by first acknowledging that this meeting is on Aboriginal land, and I'll acknowledge the traditional owners of Brisbane, the Turrbal people on the north side of Brisbane and the Jagera people on the south side of Brisbane. Just to give you a little bit of background about Indonesia and why we're doing this meeting, there's something like 14,000 refugees stranded in Indonesia, and that's a product of Australian government policy. A product of two things. One is since about 2014, the Australian Navy has been towing boats coming from Indonesia towards Australia back to Indonesia, and so people can't get out of Indonesia via boats anymore because of that hard-line naval blockade. And the other thing that the Australian government did is that they once used to take refugees, UNHCR refugees, out of Indonesia. It wasn't that many, but there was always some people, a pathway for some people out of Indonesia to Australia, and that Scott Morrison cut that back to zero in 2014. And as a result, people get there and then they can't go any further. And in Indonesia, people are considered illegal aliens. They can't work, they can't study, they tend to live on charity and what have you. We'll find out a little bit more about those conditions in this meeting today. Now, why now? Because Ian and another woman in the Refugee Action Collective in Melbourne recently visited Indonesia and had a look at the conditions that the refugees are living in up there. So we're going to hear report from Ian about what he saw, but we've also got a couple of people who are going to join us via Zoom from Indonesia to talk directly about their experience. And then we'll hear from those different speakers, and then at the end we'll have a little bit of discussion about what we might be able to do about alleviating the situation there for refugees. Before we get going any further, we've just got a very short film and a few photos to show, and we'll do that, and then we'll cross to one of our speakers in Indonesia. So Gordon, if you want to show that film, and it's of some refugees in Indonesia protesting.
I was going to say that every week there's actually demonstrations at UNHCR. This one's in Makassar this week. You want to go through the photos?
Yeah, I think so. And maybe Ian, if you want to narrate them as they come up.
Yeah, it's good enough to see from here. I think that first, these are just, Hassan will talk more about this anyway. This is inside Caladeras. It's just to give an idea, there's about 350 people inside this derelict military building. Just to give a bit of idea of there's actually put tents up inside inside the building because the rain just comes through. That was a meeting with Sepang.
Turn the mic towards you.
That's the protest.
Oh,
Yeah. That was one of the meetings that we did in Sepang, one of the IOM accommodations.
sorry.
Whoops. Okay. Yeah, most of it's inside Caldera, so we'll hear from Hassan. Hassan, does a lot of the legwork in Caldera, and yeah, it's a derelict military building that there's 350 people. To give some idea, just the conditions inside, it's very makeshift. UNHCR actually cut off the water and the electricity, and they've had to reconnect that and survive as best they can. Yeah. Jakarta. Yeah. So Hassan's in Jakarta, Caldera, and Sarah's in Makassar.
So should we maybe cross west?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, we're having all sorts of visitors flaking this, so it might be
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll cross over to our speakers now. Just to let people know that we are recording this meeting, and we hope to put together, edit it, and then publish it. If somebody speaks and you don't want to be on the film, just let us know and we'll edit you out. So we'll cross to our first speaker, which is Sarah Rezari. Now, Sarah is 15 and she's a refugee from Afghanistan. She can't go back because obviously the Taliban are now in power there, and she's been in Indonesia now since 2014. So what's that? 8 years. 8 years. Yeah. So can we cross over to Sarah? And Sarah, if you want to say a few words. Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Rezai. I'm a refugee who's been living in Indonesia for about 8 years. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share about our problems and issues with you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So should I start my speech?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna fill in about the major issues of refugees in Indonesia. One of the fundamental hardships that refugees face is mental problems. Children cannot study, parents can't provide the basic necessities for their children, which leads to having stress and mental problems. The single refugees have been away from for a decade or so from their family and children. Some couldn't handle the suffering of waiting and committed suicide. Some tried to commit suicide, but they were prevented when others found out. The slow and disappointing process of a decade is not a short period of time. The hopeless pressure has crushed the morale of the immigrants, which leads to extreme circumstances such as suicide. Another issue is the violent encounter by the Indonesian police. Is it possible if I share some photos?
Is it possible for her to share some photos?
Yes.
Yeah. If you'll have to share your screen, I think.
Yes.
I don't think I'm allowed to share screen here.
You should be. Let me hang on. How do I change your status? You should have permission to share your screen. Let me. Sarah. Make co-host. Right, you should be able to share your screen now.
Yeah, I can right now. Thank you so much.
Oops, I don't want to do that.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. Wait. Okay. as you can see,
Yeah.
we hold the peaceful demonstrations every Monday across the whole country. Every refugee of this cities they live in gather and hold a peaceful protest. But we face violent police who beat the refugees, resulting several of them injured. And there are cases that some were really beaten badly and they were admitted to hospital. I'm sorry, I don't know how to use this. I have more photos to show. These are not the only photos. Can you see these? These are the other photos as evidence. And I can show more. I feel like can show them by saying we hold peaceful demonstrations. And another thing is that instead of lobbying to find a settlement for the refugees, UNHCR tells us that they didn't send us an invitation letter. It has always been dangerous for Hazara people to live in Afghanistan because they are experiencing genocide and they have to flee the country and save their lives. So we came to Indonesia, just like any other refugee. And we're seeking asylum. Meanwhile, the UNHCR tells us that they didn't send us an invitation letter. If we don't like them, we can return to our country, which is not possible. UNHCR in countries such as Turkey and Malaysia, or other countries, if there is any other country with UNHCR organization, and the responsibility of UNHCR is to give refugee asylum and resettlement in the host countries. And considering the data we have received from UNHCR website, we see that the amount of refugees who have been sent by UNHCR organization is a lot more in Turkey and Malaysia compared to Indonesia, because UNHCR pressured the host countries to resettle the refugees. So if it's not that, what is the reason that there are more refugees from Turkey and Malaysia that are being resettled? Yet the refugees of Indonesia have been stuck in the same situation for 10 years. Immigrants have a lot of talents, skills, and abilities. We got doctors, mechanics, engineers, and etc. among the refugees. And there are lots of immigrants who have graduated from university from different fields, and just not that people have many potential to become something in the future, but instead their skill and their energy is being wasted in Indonesia. Meanwhile, they can get out of this country and become something and serve their human rights, serve the country they are living in, and they can be very useful to that country. Children and teenagers who are missing their school time, their college time, they're becoming older than 18 years old, and they're missing their university time. And for them when they go to another country, and they start from the beginning. And as soon as these migrants go to another country, it will be better for them and the country they're going. Australia and UNHCR have taken hostage. If Australia is then those who came before 2014, 2013 are still here, and they're really genuine. I'm concerned about the human disaster that's gonna happen regarding this vital issue. This is all I have for now. If there is a further question, I will try my best to answer as clearly as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sarah. We had a bit of problem hearing that because of the internet connection, but we might possibly come back to you. I'll now cross over to Hassan Ratik. He's also from Afghanistan, and he's in the Kaladaris detention center or refugee center in Jakarta, and that was where Ian took the photos of before. So if you want to speak, Hassan, that'd be great.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for all the humanitarian organizations and the people of Australia who are struggling to help these people. Thank you so much for coming here, Mr. Ian, and also Ms. Sinclair. As it was explained at the beginning, that there are some pictures of the Kaladaris building. It is an ex-military building which was empty for many years. But in 2019, in July 2019, there was about more than 1,300 people protesting in front of UNHCR office in Jakarta, central Jakarta. But they were moved to this building, which has only the capacity for maybe 70 or 80 people, because this is not made for residential building. So it is an office. There are some rooms which is very big, and there are some rooms which is very small, and it's an office. It's not for the people to live. The walls are broken, the roofs are broken when it's raining, the rain comes in. And all those photos were shown. Mr. Ian knows about this. They came here. We are thankful that they made a report from here. This is the problem of the refugees here. These people were left behind here. Even this building, we were warned to leave this building. In 2019, they brought us for 41 days here. So after 41 days, we were warned. There are newses you can find on Jakarta Post, Jakarta Globe, and TV1 News, Indonesia, and some others. You can find that they were warning us to leave this building. We were asking them, you should find a replaced solution, then you should warn us. And this is not the right of the refugees. You have to provide them because they do not have the right to work here. They do not have the right to any of their basic rights. So you should first provide them financial assistance or provide them any other place to go to live. Then you warn them or give them warning letters to leave this building. More than 50 people received warning letters from UNHCR. And UNHCR was writing that you are violating human rights. There's only one article of the human rights were violated here, maybe, but there are many conventions, many rules and regulations, many treaties, international or national treaties, presidential regulation. If they are violated, if with hundreds of articles, if they are violated by UNHCR or the government of Indonesia or the government of Australia, it's okay, no problem. And because UNHCR, the refugees does not have voice to reach, even they are banned to get interviewed by any international media. 2 times I'm here and they were published it. They never. Even if some of the refugees are there asking for the refugees' right, they're being stopped to ask that. I give you an example. If I gave some documents to Mr. Ian, and in 2019 I joined. There is an annual a refugee representative election held by UNHCR and partners CWS, CRS, and JRS. They held it every year. In 2019, I appointed myself and I took part there. I got 231 votes, but I was rejected because I was asking the refugees' right for the refugees' rights. I was rejecting 6 others who has less votes than me, less than 200 votes, with 74 votes, with 80 votes, they were accepted. This is what UNHCR is doing because refugees are not allowed to raise their voice. They are being oppressed here. They are, yeah, it is a kind of, we can say that the product of, is mentioned at the beginning, and the product of the government of Australia. It is more than $11 billion were spent to detain these people here in the Indonesia or offshore, maybe Nauru, Manus, Papua, this more than $11 billion that could make anything in Australia, that could do many things for these people, and these people could do many things in Australia, could build their own lives, could build Australia, could pay taxes to Australia, and it was good if they have done it, but they detained these people, which is called arbitrary detention. And arbitrary detention, which is the violation of human right, violation of the right of the literacy. And it is really, but Australia, the government of Australia is paying those monies, the taxpayers' monies, to detain human being here for 10 years. Unfortunately, when we go to the UNHCR, they never answer us. They know people to check anything, to record their voices, and we do not have any small evidence from their office. And if you go to the Geneva websites, you can find out that that the cases that submitted, you can have access to them, but you cannot have access to the quota which is given to the refugees, to the Indonesia or any other countries. The cases that which is submitted, you can have access to them. The resettlement, you can have access to them. But the quota which is for the given to the refugees in Indonesia, we cannot have access to them, this is something hidden. And if there is nothing behind this, so why should you hide it from the people? There is something. And these are all being done by the government of Australia, and with the collaboration with the government of Indonesia, with UNHCR, Indonesia, and also which is being paid to keep these people here, to keep these people in arbitrary detention. 24 people committed suicide. Unfortunately, 17 of them, we do not have them now with us. And some of them are rescued, that we are happy they are with us still. And these are all because they are mentally sick and they are not healthy. The people who fled being killed or from persecution, being so those people now coming people being themselves. These are the result or the product of the government of Australia that they are doing with these people. And you all realize about what has happened in Papua and also Nauru, Manus, and also here in Indonesia, which is not yet released many news from here because it was censored many times. Even we have heard from someone who was working with BBC in 2017 that there is an agreement between them, with the UNHCR and BBC, that no news should be released from here in Indonesia for the refugees, because of the refugees. And these are the things being done. And by the money which is being given by the taxpayers of the Australia, and they are doing it. The government is spending those monies, which is being made by hard working of the people of Australia, and the government is doing it, spend it like this in detaining the people in Indonesia, in Papua, and like this, which is really a kind of human right violation. But unfortunately, we do not have any access to court. We do not have anyone to advocate us. The only thing that we have had is some organizations just like RAC or from Australia. They are struggling for us. They came here and they made documentary. They are the ones, the people who are trying to raise the voice of the refugees. But other things we do not have. As it was mentioned that now 33,100 asylum seekers are living in Indonesia, which is from since October 2015, means more than 7 years. They are still living as asylum seeker. And the reason why the UNHCR Indonesia is not interviewing them, they always say, because you Afghan refugees, especially Hazara refugees, because of the situation in Afghanistan, we know that your lives are in Afghanistan in fair, and that's why there is no need to interview you, to recognize you as a refugee. But unfortunately, that's not correct. At the same time, they are interviewing some of the people from 2020, but others from 2014, 2015, 2016 are remaining yet here. They are lying. They're 100%, and there are something in their websites, but they are not telling the same thing with the refugees when they go to their offices, because the refugees cannot have any phone to record them, cannot have any device to record them. That's why they're, as it was mentioned by Sarah, that they are telling that we didn't invite you, go back to your country. And also the UNHCR has zero tolerance, cannot tolerate you. And it is against their own, UNHCR's own code of conduct. And the ethical code of UNHCR says that you should be patient and should tolerate any kind of from the refugees, or you should have a good conduct with them. You should treat them with humanly, or just like human being. But unfortunately, there are videos and also voice records that the UNHCR officers says that the UNHCR tolerance, the UNHCR has zero tolerance. They are speaking it because there is no one to raise the refugees' voice. There is no one to hear them, and they do not have any access to court, to international court. And there are some differences between the refugees in Indonesia and also in Naro Manus, because refugees in Indonesia has directly, the being should be handled by UNHCR. And that's why UNHCR is keeping quiet and silent. You cannot find even one report of those 24 people who committed suicide on UNHCR's website or social media. But UNHCR in Australia, they are always shouting for the refugees in Australia, whose responsibility goes directly to your government of Australia. And here, all the humanitarian organizations, just like Amnesty International, even they are quiet. The Human Rights Watch, they are quiet, they are silent. I talked with Human Rights Watch here for 15 minutes, and they finally said, we cannot do something for you. Because at the end, they go to, and they're connected with UNHCR, and yeah, that's why all of them are silent. No one raised their voice, and they're just keeping silent, they're quiet. They do nothing for these people. I met with Amnesty International head here. We had a protest in front of your Amnesty International. And also I talked with Human Rights Watch. They did nothing for these people. I hope you people that now trying to find any solution for these people, you could do something. We are thankful of you. We are thankful of anyone who even just write a word on social media or even a step, only one step for these people, for the freeing these people from this arbitrary detention here, which is a limbo for 10 years. Thank you so much. If there is a question, I will be here.
Okay, thanks, Hassan. Well, I'll now hand the meeting over to Ian, and he's going to tell us about his experience in from his trip in Indonesia. Ian.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Hassan and Sarah. Hassan, both Hassan and Sarah met them. Hassan in Jakarta and Sarah in Makassar. They were both very, very generous with their time and sort of explaining the situation that they confronted, not just themselves, but for the people that they represent. And Caladeras is I imagine people got a lot of questions having just listened to Sarah and Hassan. But Caladeras really deserves a story in itself. So because it's not run by IOM, as perhaps I should explain at the moment. There are about 14,000 refugees and asylum seekers. About half of them are from Afghanistan. Since 2018, they previously were detained actually in Australian-funded detention centres, but since 2018, they've been housed in IOM accommodation, which is substandard. Mostly, it's derelict, unhygienic, overcrowded. I can go through some more of those details. Caladeras, has got a particular place because it's not run by IOM. People occupied, Caladeras in an attempt to get accommodation at a time when people could only get it in the detention centres. And as Hassan said, actually the UNHCR and others tried to, successfully evicted, some of the people, but there's about 350 who and I went to Indonesia to try and get some information about what was happening in Indonesia. And part of the reason for that is that Indonesia has always been part of Operation Sovereign Borders. It's always been a part of politically part of the Australia's border protection apparatus, if you like. So we saw the first turn back was actually in December 2013, and actually I met one of the people who was on the first boat that was turned back in Jakarta. But the turning back to Indonesia and effectively using Indonesia as a warehouse for refugees has actually been an integral part of the whole Operation Sovereign Borders apparatus. And so while our attention, I think over the last 20 years perhaps, has been very much focused on detention in Australia, on Nauru and Manus as the two main offshore detention places that the government used. Nonetheless, Indonesia has had its place, and I think that we saw the opportunity now with the Labor government to do something about the fact that in 2014, amongst other things that Scott Morrison did, was to actually ban UNHCR refugees who put it the other way around. They would only accept refugees from Indonesia who had registered with UNHCR prior to July 2014. So that ban has meant that the people who are in Indonesia now, except for, there's still about 1,000 actually, pre-July 2014, they're banned from coming, to Australia. And one of the other consequences that Hassan alluded to is that the fact that Australia has banned them coming also has implications for other countries. Most other resettling countries consider that people who are in Indonesia are Australia's responsibility, and so lean on UNHCR, lean on Australia to actually say you should be taking these people. They are your responsibility. So UNHCR has a lot of difficulty both in resettling refugees in other countries, and other countries actually, kind of push back in terms of referrals from Indonesia to, to other countries. So in that respect, it's very, very clear that the people who are in Indonesia are Australia's responsibility. And there's, there's, can go into it, but there's a lot of, legal assessments that actually indicate that, legally and internationally, certainly Australia has that responsibility accountable. That's right. They have to be registered with UNHCR before July 2014. Anyone after July 2014 is banned from coming to Australia. Yeah. So that banned totally. Yes. They've been sitting there, not quite forever, but yes. So if the ban isn't lifted, they'll be sitting there forever in terms of Australia. Yeah. Yeah. No. That's part of what Hassan and Sarah is referring to, is that UNHCR says we can't do anything. You have to find, you find a sponsorship, you find another country, you find some other kind of visa that you can apply for. It's why what was Hassan was referring to. The UNHCR doesn't even bother interviewing, particularly Afghans now in Indonesia. They know they're refugees. But they don't bother interviewing them, and that has implications, because it means if you haven't got your refugee card, actually you can't even apply offshore to Australia, because one of the things they ask you for is whether you are a UNHCR refugee. No other place is going to take you because you haven't got a UNHCR card that says you are a refugee. So it's worse than a catch. It's worse than a catch-22 in that respect. And there are many of those details. I mean, it's mind-boggling when you look at this. As mind-boggling as anything we know from the experience of detention in Australia or offshore, those kinds of details. And if people got questions, I'm happy to go into it, but it does get quite confounding. And the other point that Hassan also made, is that the lack of consistency, because we're told, and we're told a number of times, that Pakistanis, Rohingyans are banned entirely. People are there from 2013. One of the Rohingya guys, one of the rep with UNHCR, actually told us he does not know of any Rohingya being resettled from Indonesia to Australia since 2012. Other people have said, Pakistanis, Africans the same. Many Africans there from 2012, 2013. They don't know of any people who've ever been referred from Indonesia to Australia, and they're told informally, because you can't record, you've got no information, but the UNHCR says that Australia has banned, will not accept African refugees from Indonesia. Now these are, they're horrifying, even if even given the ban, but it does mean that people who, even prior to July 2014, if you're African, if you're Rohingya, if you're Pakistani, then you're not even in the race. And those things, there have been times when those things have got a little mention in the press in Australia, but they're not routinely actually talked about. What are the preferences? What are preferences Australia has? What are the priorities that have been put forward? No. Anyone who just arrived, yes. Yep. That's right. Yep. Yeah. Yes. Yes. That's right. No chance. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you can go through. If people got particular questions, I can go through that. Some of the things. Look, I'll tell you one little. So it is overwhelming.
People on the thing can't hear you because you need to speak through the mic. So we'll okay. Have Ian speak, and then we'll
yes.
Put the mic around.
Look, the thing is big, and I know it's a lot. It is a lot to take in, But given you've raised the question, I actually met an Afghan woman in Cisarua. She's actually the mother of 4 Australian citizens, because her husband actually arrived, went by boat in 2013, is now a citizen, and he's been able to visit Indonesia, where his wife has been. She now has 4 children. They're Australian citizens because the father is an Australian citizen. they're stuck in Indonesia. So that's the craziness of the situation. So there's remember that there's two dates. One is like I started at the beginning, say we went to Indonesia because of that ban. I mean, people who have been around the refugee movement will know that the July 2014 is a date that we have raised, periodically in Australia about the need to lift the ban, about, the fact that people are stuck in Indonesia, in particular when the Taliban took over. It became a very sharp point, of debate. I think there were so many Afghans in Indonesia who could have been brought to Australia, and the consequences that would have been for them and for their families. But that didn't happen. I'll come back to that. The other thing, so I suppose that was the first thing we wanted to do, was to look at tried to explain to the people that we met in Indonesia that we think there's an opportunity now to actually campaign quite hard to lift that ban, to get the July 2014 ban, lifted. The other thing that we weren't aware of before we went was actually the situation with IOM. Now, IOM is the International Organization for Migration. I probably haven't got time to go into IOM, but IOM is not it's not a UN organization, although it now has some bodgy partnership. But something like to pretend it's some kind of UN organization with some kind of human rights mandate. It doesn't. It really is an organization that does the bidding of the governments that hire it, that sponsor it. But in Indonesia, in Indonesia, IOM is majoritarily sponsored by the Australian government, funded by the Australian government, and in that regard, in Indonesia, it does the same job that we know of, Serco, in Australia, or of the people who run the detention centres in Nauru and Manus Island. So they're paid by Australia to house, if that's what you can call it, to have the accommodation in Jakarta, in Makassar, in Medan, in the Tanjung Pinang. Actually, there are many, many places that I wasn't aware. There's so many places actually had refugee accommodation in Indonesia. So IOM is majority paid by the government to the Australian government to do that, but to house, and they also have responsibility for the allowance, and that's something else which we were actually quite shocked by, because they get 1,250,000 rupiah a month per adult. Now that's about $125. That money hasn't changed since at least since before 2012. What it means now is that with the amount which the cost of living has actually increased, that it's not even a poverty allowance. Like, it is just people cannot, survive on that amount of money. And that has been a very persistent source of complaint. It's one of the reasons that probably people might have found it difficult about the chant in the video right at the beginning. But one of the chants is about IOM. And IOM being a jailer, and so on. So that's the thing about the money. There's two other things about the money that in 2014 the IOM just decided that regardless of the age of the children, that any refugee children would only get 500,000 rupiah. So it meant if you were a family of four with two parents and two adult children, you would have been getting 4 times the 1.2 million initially. 2014, that was cut. So the two adult children only got 500,000 each. So it was a very dramatic drop. But even worse is that since March 2018, actually people get no money. So one of the families in Caladeras, is a family of 8, two parents, 6 children. They get one income, 1.2,500,000 for 8 people. Now that's become increasingly common, and it's partly for the question that came up earlier. One of the things that's very obvious to me is that from 2017, 2018, families of Afghans actually started to arrive in Indonesia. So the wives and mothers and children actually started to join fathers and husbands who had been in Indonesia for 7 or 8 years. Now, what it means is that there are a very large number now, and Sarah could perhaps say a little bit because she's one of them in a family, one of the unsupported families, and there's at least 25 unsupported families in Makassar, alone. So that the misery, that's inflicted in that regard is very, very very rampant, and it's one of those completely hidden circumstances of the refugees that are being warehoused, that are being paid for by, because Australia also majority funds, UNHCR in Indonesia and IOM. So in that regard, the question of Australia's responsibility is, that much is very obvious. Yes. Okay. So. Yeah, I mean, I've got some figures, but maybe I'll just leave those figures. The two things I really wanted to, to concentrate and get across, I think, is the ban, the July ban. Morrison implemented that ban because he said it was taking the sugar off the table. But hopefully people can see from the beginning of Operation Sovereign Borders and the turnbacks, the question what was happening in Indonesia, the whole deter and detain sort of ideology that was associated with Operation Sovereign Borders operated in Indonesia, as in Indonesia as well. So the ban was actually kind of a part of the Australian government trying to prevent people actually coming to Indonesia in the first place, and to make the circumstances as miserable as they possibly could in Indonesia as part of their deterrence policy. So in that respect, I think that the problem that we've got at the moment is that the Labor Party is not committed to lifting the ban. So I mean, that's one of the reasons that we think that now is a good time to begin the campaign. That the Morrison government said that one of the things they were committed to was to bring 16,500 Afghans over the next 4 years. The Labor Party has said they will be committed to that, but they can't get Afghans out of Afghanistan. The question of where the 16,500 is going to come from, well, for us sitting here, I think is very obvious. There's 7,000 in Indonesia. It could come very quickly. But the Labor government has said nothing, about ending that ban and allowing the refugees who are in Indonesia to make applications and to accept them into Australia. So I think that's one of the most important things that we want to raise, and to try and raise awareness about the situation in Indonesia and why that ban has got to go. The other thing I've just been over is the question of the income. Now, while the solution overall is for the refugees in Indonesia to come to Australia, we'll continue to campaign for that. But I think in the immediate thing, if we can sort of raise that issue about everybody in Indonesia should be paid not just the 1.25 million. That needs to be at least doubled and probably trebled to make it even a poverty income. So we'll. Yeah, it's $125 a month. That's what adult $125 a month. So to give a bit of an idea, so a child now gets 500,000 rupiah a month. One chicken is about 70,000 now. So one chicken is 10% of the monthly income of a child if they get that income. I could go through some other figures, but that's what's happened over the last few years. Whether you're talking about cooking oil, whether you're talking about gas, whether you're talking about clothes, the cost of living has doubled for those things for the refugees. And that much is obvious. You find someone who's actually trying to eke out an existence on that amount of money, they're sick, they're unwell, they're skinny, the kids are undernourished. That much is obvious. The other thing, I suppose, which Sarah touched on, is just the degree of vulnerability, right? Refugees, they can't work, they can't marry, they're not entitled to have a driver's license, they can't buy property. Now, what it means is that they're extremely vulnerable, and so it just becomes part of life. If the local cops want to, extort a bit of money, they just stop a refugee on a bike. You not allowed to, so it's either you pay up, bribe, on your way, or we'll take you to the detention centre. That kind of constant question, of extortion and vulnerability is just what they live with. The children, now it varies from place to place, but primary children can go to school, but mostly they don't. Mostly they don't because of language, because of the casual discrimination, if you like, but sometimes there's much more explicit discrimination that takes place. I can go into that a bit more, if people want. There are some places where the religious discrimination has actually been intense, like in Yogyakarta now. And I don't want to say it's not typical, but I'll mention Yogyakarta to give you some idea that there are no refugees in Yogyakarta anymore because there are effectively pogroms by Sunni fundamentalists against the Shia Afghan, and the government took all the refugees and asylum seekers out of Yogyakarta. Now that's not typical at all, but there are instances of that kind of discrimination that happens in other, particularly outside of Jakarta. The other thing I want to mention in terms of the vulnerability, again, I heard, as you do, hear little references to the protests occasionally that were taking place in Indonesia. But there are weekly protests outside UNHCR, not in Jakarta, but in Makassar, Tanjung Pinang, Medan, Surabaya, almost every other place where there's got refugees. There are weekly protests because, particularly since 2018, the situation has become intolerable. And what Sarah's referring to when she showed those photos a couple of weeks before, it's about 6 weeks now, I think, there was a particularly brutal attack in Makassar where they turned out the lights and turned the cops on the protests. People were bashed, including children. People were hospitalised, and that's, again, it's not everywhere and it's not all the time, but it is routine. That very often people are arrested and bashed at these protests. In Tanjung Pinang, where the IO accommodation is about 25 kilometres outside of Tanjung Pinang, and people generally can get they got a bus, mostly to get, and the police actually banned them from the bus so that they couldn't get to the city to actually have the protest. Now, to their enormous credit, I mean, some people rode motorbikes, of course, but some people walked 25 kilometres, but they were also attacked by the police before they got to Tanjung Pinang. So that repression is is a constant part of their existence. There are other things which are more mundane perhaps, but nonetheless in most of the IOM accommodation there's a curfew. People are expected to be back, and the time varies, but 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock there's a curfew. Now it's not always implemented. People climb over the fence. The gate's usually locked, but people do climb over the fence afterwards. But the fact is you can be arrested, and people are arrested and are detained if they violate those curfews. And usually what happens is they go to the detention centre and they have to pay a bribe to get out. Not many people, and certainly I didn't know, that they're actually confined to the city. It is quite routine for people who even want to go outside to go to a national park, to go for a walk. To visit, that if they're outside the city limits, they can and are detained. Just after I left Makassar, 3 people that I knew were actually detained because they were caught outside the city limits. So those kinds of things, anyway, I suppose, tried to give the impression of the extent to which they are, just the degree of repression that they constantly face. Okay, well, maybe that's so I've got some various figures, but maybe it's enough to give people a bit of a flavour, and happy to answer questions. I'm sure Hassan and Sarah will also be happy to answer questions. One other little thing, which again just horrified me. They 2 people and there's probably more, but that they started baking bread, to try and make a little bit more money. So they bake the bread, were selling it either to other local stall holders or even to other refugees. In both instances, they were shut down by Indonesian immigration with UNHCR's sanction. because they're not entitled to work, they're not allowed to work, and that was shut down accordingly. So anyway, hopefully that's given a bit of an idea about the situation in Indonesia. It is kind of the hidden offshore detention islands as far as our experience here is concerned. And obviously there's still things, the main thing that we're campaigning at the moment is obviously the question of the permanent permanent visas for the people who are the TPVs and the SHAVs, for the people on bridging visas, the people on no visas, and the people who are rejected under the fast track system. But I think the question of the end the ban, which has been on most of our protest demands since Labor was elected, I think needs to go up our agenda a little bit. So between now and the end of the year, Margaret and I are doing little report backs. So we're talking to grandmums, we're talking to the RCC, we're talking to Labor for refugees. There'll be another bit of a launch with Margaret and I speaking with other Indonesians speaking on the 5th of December. But we'll certainly be looking to, elevate the question of ending the ban and to bring the refugees from Indonesia as a much more prominent part of the campaign. And then so we'll also be looking from the beginning of the year to try to do a subsidiary campaign about the allowance to see if we can do something. Because if you look at the overall amount of money that we're talking about, actually they could treble that allowance in Indonesia, and it would be like it's nothing, even in terms of the amount of money that they're handing over to UNHCR and to IOM at the moment. Leave aside, what they're spending overall, and operations on borders and maintenance of offshore detention. So yeah, maybe I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ian, and thanks to Sarah and Hassan. We'll now open it up to questions and discussion. So if you've got a question or want to, just hang on, Tick. If you've got a question, we'll bring the mic to you. You've got to speak into the mic. Don't think it's going to come through the loudspeaker here, but that is for the people on the internet, so they can hear it. So we'll have a little bit of discussion, and then we might even go back to our speakers there. So, Sitar.
Hi everyone, I'm Stara. So I'm an advocate for refugee rights, and I'm also from Afghanistan. I only came to Australia in 2018, and my dad was in Indonesia. I know and understand the pain of the people and suffering in Indonesia. It's like a really miserable place it's like a really hidden place where no one can see you, what you're going through, and no one can understand you unless you go through it. I'm thank you, the RAC, and all of you today, and joining here and listening to our two lovely guests here and to their voice. They're not only a voice for themselves, they're a voice for the people in Indonesia suffering and going through the hardship. And I thank you, Mr. Hassan and Ms. Sarah, for sharing your story, for raising a people's voice. I truly understand you guys, because it's hard, it's devastating. Like your people, probably they're thinking in Afghanistan that you're gonna get accepted in Australia, while the Australian government is not doing anything about it. It's not the Australian government, it's all the NATO government who committed to do something for it. So USR is basically a funded like a company to stand for human rights, but the situation that they're going through in Indonesia, that is totally not like human rights, that's like going against human rights. So keeping people in Indonesia, detaining them in detention center, treating them like a criminal, that is not actually protecting human rights, that's basically going against human rights. And also my question was to Mr. Hassan. So you said that the USR is not interviewing people from 2014. In fact, they're interviewing from people from 2020 when they arrived in Indonesia. Can you please give us a detail about that? A bit more details? Like explain that a bit more? What do you mean by that? Thank you.
Okay. Hassan, did you get that question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. The asylum seekers, now people living, I am one of those asylum seekers who entered into Indonesia in January 2016. So before there are, since October 2015, there are people remaining now, it's more than 7 years that are still asylum seekers, and I am one of them. When we go, and I had more than 30 meetings with UNHCR officials from Maiman, from Thomas Vargas, Mr. Thomas Vargas, Maiman, to a small officer, their registration officer. I met them. I had many as a representative or as a speaker of the refugees. I met all of them. I had there were people from the government of Indonesia, representatives from the government of Indonesia in our meeting, and I asked them that what is the problem that people remaining from 2015, but others from 2020, 2021, they are interviewed and they get RSD result, and they're being recognized as a refugee. They say that because the government, it is written on their website, because the government of Indonesia, the president of Indonesia, Mr. Joko Widodo, has signed a presidential decree, which is number 125, signed in 31st December 2016. And the government of Indonesia recognized the refugees and asylum seekers the same. They are recognized as refugees, but that is within Indonesia. It is not the solution. Now, again, if these people are being resettled to third country, they are still asylum seekers. This is the true story, but UNHCR says that to keep the people silent, they say that the Afghan people, Hazara Afghan people, they are recognized because of the situation in Afghanistan. They are recognized already a refugee. But when they recognize some of the asylum seekers as refugee, they give them an official letter that in this state, you are recognized as a refugee. Now you are a refugee, not anymore asylum seeker anymore. So I asked them if that is true, that you have recognized all the Afghan Hazara refugees, asylum seekers as a refugee here, then why don't you give those official letter to them that, yes, you are recognized as refugee, you are no more asylum seeker anymore. There are 3,100 asylum seekers since October 2015. They are remaining until now. They are remaining asylum seekers, but people from 2018 are resettled to third country. They say that when we recognize people vulnerable, then we interview those people. And I asked them that if you never asked some asylum seeker about their situation, you never interviewed them, how do you know that they are vulnerable or not? But there are we can say that behind the scene there are some corruptions. There are some many things that I ask many reporters, journalists, or any organization, humanitarian organization, that there should be a team of investigative team that should go and should investigate about these things. What is the problem? They recognize someone that with the same case, with the same situation as vulnerable, and others are still from 2013 to 2012, they are remaining here. They are remaining here. But from 2018, they are being resettled to their country. The question is here that how do they know if they never asked the asylum seekers about their situation? They never interviewed them. They should interview them first. This is the, I don't know more, because we cannot have any evidence from them. We cannot record them in their offices. So these are the problems that's going on in Indonesia.
Okay, thanks, Hassan. We've got another question here, but if the people who are watching the meeting on Zoom want to ask a question, you just have to type it into the chat. So, Lorraine.
Hi. I've been really involved with asylum seekers, as Mark would know, since 2012, and involved very heavily both at BITA and people who've come through BITA and who've moved all around, as well as people overseas. And this is the first time I've even heard about the ban. How come? I mean, I'm just shocked that has anyone else, you all know about the ban before? Did anyone know about it?
A lot of people would have heard, Lorraine. It's been one of the demands of most of the rallies since 2014. It's been included somewhere, but it's not had the prominence. I mean, that's why
I've never heard of it, no, never. And I know we have
to take some responsibility for that. So
yeah, because it's one of the big problems is you've got a lot of information down south in Sydney and Melbourne. It doesn't filter up here. We've got enough problems anyway. And I know we're focused, and I know years ago, Freddie used to say Queensland's the soft underbelly, and I think the government thought that too, but they found that Queenslanders do get together, and we fought the whole baby Asher and everything. We've done incredible things. We haven't got a central body. We're lots of little subgroups, which is good too, but it's got a thing that we haven't got a central thing that coordinates us. But my question is, several things, is about education. We've got to do heaps of education, not only of, there's a big cohort of people who have been involved and who are involved with asylum seekers across Brisbane, Toowoomba, in Queensland. How do we go about the education of our own people who are and who we need to educate beyond? Education is huge, needs to happen. If we're going to talk about ban, all that stuff, we've got to do education that goes beyond to the media, which hasn't happened at all in Queensland. We're way, way behind. So I think we need to there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. The whole TPV, there's a whole lack of knowledge somehow or other amongst even people who are advocates. So somehow or other, we've got to do big education stuff, both here, and we've really got to, as you know, we're limited. We've got the Courier Mail, and that's a real down thing in Queensland. We don't have any of your papers down south. We've also got, I don't know who our media outlets are. I know I used to get in touch with, what's his name, Grant down, whatever. But so education's a big one. I'll keep quiet. UNHCR, can we do something? They have to be challenged, or are they in the pockets of the Australian government if they're supporting the whole thing in Indonesia? Is that true? Are they supporting Australian government?
They're paid by the Australian government. Maybe I can answer that.
Yeah, so can you answer that question about how do we do the education and how can we do something with UNHCR? Because that has to happen.
Well, part of the education, I think, is real. I mean, it's not just here, and it's not just the Courier Mail. Like, I think it's going to mean meetings, it's going to mean fact sheets, it's going to mean more of these kinds of things to actually get across. I mean, as we know from the early days of the campaign, you couldn't rely on the Sydney Morning Herald or the Australian to actually raise awareness and really inform people what was happening. Mostly it did happen, in meetings like this and, organising even more, local meetings and things. And we are going to need, to do that. I think one of the values that Margaret and I are going, and now we've got such very good contacts in Indonesia, we can get very, very good information about anything that's happening. And certainly we'll be trying to push those things into the media. Now, when I get a report about the protests in Indonesia, actually I do send it to the journalists so that they're starting to get things. So, it's every week. There's a protest in Makassar every week, and haven't got in the media here yet, but I think that's the way it didn't used to get in the media in 2000, 2001, 2002. Yeah, no, for sure, Lorraine. Yeah, I think the other UNHCR is another whole problem. I think because on the one hand, UNHCR is constrained by the Australian government policies. So I think our focus needs to be on the ban. Now, that's not a UNHCR ban, it's an Australian government ban, the lifter ban that they imposed in 2014. I've got no doubt that the UNHCR would refer refugees, all the refugees, not all the refugees, they would refer some of the refugees if that ban was lifted. More people would actually be referred to Australia. But as Hassan has gone over, there are things that actually happen in Indonesia, and there are inconsistencies that we know very well happen with the operations of the detention centre regime here, the immigration here. Like, it's inexplicable. People arrive on the same boat from the same village. One becomes a refugee, the other doesn't. Faili Kurds, half the Faili Kurds are accepted, half the Faili Kurds are rejected. The vicissitudes, the inconsistencies that Hassan talks about, they are bewildering, and they're kinds of things which make people despairing in Indonesia. The fact that someone who's been sitting there since 2013 or 2014, never been referred by UNHCR, and then someone will come in 2018 and 2019, actually is interviewed and is referred because UNHCR has determined that this is a particular case. Now, they may well be a particular case, so no one in Indonesia suggests they're not. What they are saying, though, is how do we know that all the people who haven't been interviewed aren't exceptional cases either? And as I said in the introduction, if you haven't got your refugee card, then you can't apply to Canada. You can't apply to Sweden. You can't apply to New Zealand. You've got to have that refugee card. So when the UNHCR says, well, it doesn't matter to us, the Indonesian government says asylum seeker refugee, that's fine. It does matter if you're a refugee and want to get somewhere where you can get safety and security and some kind of resettlement. So there's a lot of those things that we will need to take up. But I think in here right now, I think our focus has to be lift the ban. I think if we get that ban lifted, then we're in a far better place, to actually deal with all the other, inconsistencies. That's certainly true, and we'll call that out as we go. But the fact is that unless we lift the ban, it doesn't matter about UNHCR. UNHCR can do what the hell they like and do what the hell they like. If we get the ban lifted, then at least the people who are in Indonesia can actually start to be referred to Australia.
Okay. Okay. I've got a question here from the chat. I'll read that, and then I'll take Satara, and then we'll go back to the speakers. Was there anybody else speaking? No, that's it. Yeah. The question is, I agree with few people. I agree that few people in Queensland would be aware of the Indonesian refugee situation. I cannot remember any coverage on this issue here. What is the ABC's correspondence for Indonesia doing with regard to this issue? And now I'll take a question and a comment from Satara. On the mic, yeah.
So we're saying lift the ban. Do we mean like to allow the boats back to enter Australia, or like lift the ban by allowing people to like prove their application in Indonesia and then allowing the people to come like legally? That's how they call it.
Yeah. It means the government has to say that they will accept release anyone who arrives in Indonesia can actually apply. I mean, there's other things to add to that. I think we don't know the quota, for example, is still a big, is still a big argument. I said the government has said that they will 16,500 over the next 4 years. That's too little as far as we're concerned. And one of the points I didn't, but if they started to resettle 4,000 over 4 years out of Indonesia, then we could clear Indonesia in 2 years. So, but I think we have to say the first thing is lift the ban. There are still other things. The Labor Party said they will increase the quota to 27,500. I think they'll probably do that, next year around the time of the budget. But as long as they leave that ban there, then people in Indonesia are stuck.
Also, I want to make that clear. So, how Mr. Hassan said that they have been acknowledged as a refugees or asylum seeker from Afghanistan, but the only thing they didn't get the card, like the basic approval. Is that what you mean?
What's happening is that people arrive not just arrive now, but people who have arrived get a registration card. They get a UNHCR registration card, but they're not refugees. They've not had a refugee determination. So one of the things when you make the application, you fill out your 842, offshore visa application. One of the questions is, are you a UNHCR refugee? Well, you've not been interviewed, you've not been determined by a refugee. You haven't got the card from the UNHCR which says you are a refugee. So the Indonesian government says they don't care. You can be refugee or asylum seeker. It doesn't matter. You can just get registered. It doesn't matter in Indonesia. It does matter anywhere else. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just, I might just come in here myself and give people a little bit of background, and Ian might be able to fill this out. But my understanding is that Australia used to take about 350 refugees a year out of Indonesia. Then I believe Julia Gillard cut it back to about 50. And then Scott Morrison cut it back to 0. And I think the thinking behind it is to, they feel like if you have, if you're taking refugees out of Indonesia, then people will come towards Indonesia, and then they'll be tempted to get on boats if they're waiting there a long time. So they want them as far away from the Australian shore as possible. Any more? Yes. Just hang on a tick. We'll get the mic to you.
No, my voice is clear.
Oh, no.
I don't like. Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry, guys. My voice is clear because I was a teacher. When I came to Australia, I accept the Australia government is okay. But when I came here, after spend my time, I said no. So different. If you have a money, Australian government said yes. If you have a hard work, Australian government said yes, because take the money. Some people the same as me, I was a teacher, I'm a psychologist. I'm getting a little bit problem for the heart, blah, blah, like this. At the moment, I'm not working. No, accept my paperwork for my family. This is a very big problem, corruption. Do you know? If I'm very good, I'm working never, ever, and the government, I give it the money for the government. Government must accept my situation. One another things, I forgot this, okay. Yeah, my family at the moment in Indonesia, I'm sending money or survive. 2 times I'm paperwork, Australia said yes, 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 at the moment and now. Very, very big problem for Australian government. I asked the lawyer, can go another country? Said, no, your paperwork is here. My family paperwork here. Why you not accept coming in this country? Why? I give it a lot of money for lawyer or somebody because government corruption and the lawyer of one other people just said, yes, I can do that, I can do that. And take it your money, take it your money. $11,000 I gave to lawyer. But 3 times the government said no. Why? For what? Can give it back my money?
I wish.
Oh, government is.
Yeah.
So, sorry. I'm not talking for another verb about the government. Yeah. Thank you so much, Amprasha.
Yeah. I've got another question here. It says, hi everyone, I'm Anita Yusofi from Multicultural Australia. First of all, thank you so much from Hassan and Sarah. As we have a big problem, refugees arrivals from Indonesia and providing services for them. My question is from Hassan. That's to Hassan. How are they treating refugees rather than asylum seeker? And what is the different services for refugees and asylum seekers? I understand the second part of the question. What is the difference in services for refugees compared to asylum seekers. You want to respond to that, or Hassan? That's the first one.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hassan can speak from Indonesia, but there are no services. Yeah, like it's not a question of being a distinction between services for asylum seekers and refugees. There are just no services. And as we've just been discussing, as far as the Indonesian government is concerned and immigration is concerned, they make no distinction between asylum seekers and refugees. You are an illegal immigrant. And that's something I didn't really, kind of go into, but that underpins a lot of the Indonesian government's attitude. The refugees are illegal immigrants, so they're confined to the cities. They're, no work and no education, and things that I, went through before. Hassan, yeah, okay, yeah, Hassan.
Yeah, thanks so much. The question from Ms. Anita. So the difference between, there is no service, actually. There is no service for the refugees. Only about 7,500 of these people are under the protection of IOM. They receive accommodation. They have accommodation from IOM, and they are receiving monthly assistance, cash assistance, as it was said that it is about $125 Australian dollars can be. That is for about 7,000 and around 7,500 of the people. More than 5,000 people are not receiving any assistance from anyone, any service from anyone, from the government, nothing from the government, nothing from IOM, nothing from UNHCR, nothing. There is no service for these people. They are receiving from outside, their relatives, their family members, their friends, they are receiving from this. The refugees, there is no difference between refugees and asylum seekers. There is one big difference when the asylum seekers cannot fall under the protection of 1951 convention. They keep these people so that they could send them back anytime they want. That's all. Because the 1951 convention, it does not protect the asylum seekers. It just protects the when you are refugees, when you are recognized as refugees and you have the card for refugee card. And there is no service for the refugees as well, other services here for the asylum seeker as well. They are being treated the same, but it is it's a threat for the asylum seekers still that they can be sent anytime back to their countries, even if there is a threat their life for their lives or for them, they can be sent anytime they want. This is the difference, and there is no service for them. Even there is, as I said, that there is a presidential decree signed in 2016, but that is only inside the paper. That's only inside the paper, and it's not implemented. It is not practiced. And we are living here, as you have seen the pictures of this building. This is only the building. We protested from July 2019 until July 2020. For 1 year, all the babies, pregnant women, elderly people, they went about 17 kilometers on foot. We had rally during the COVID pandemic in July 2020, sorry. It was during the pandemic, we went from here to central Jakarta for 17 kilometers away from here. And that after 1 year, the government has given this building to us without any electricity, without any water, without any kind of facility. It is just we are living inside the tents. We are living with a limited electricity that we always beg from any small groups of people. We ask them to pay for the bill, of the water bill. We sometimes remain without water for 10 days, for 20 days, for 15 days. And because we cannot pay, the refugees cannot pay, we ask some people, we beg them, we request them to pay. And after maybe 1 week or 10 days, we find someone to pay for the bills. there is no service, nothing is here. Anything comes from outside, being, as I saw the budget of Australian budget this year, it was 33 million or 35 million dollars given to Indonesia. But that is just for them, not for the refugees. It is not given to the refugees. There is no service for the refugees. Or more than 5,500 people, they are living independently. Some of them may be selling something, some working hiddenly. If they are being arrested, they can be jailed, they can be detained. And this is the situation of these people.
I'm going to wind up the meeting, Lorraine. Okay. I'll get Ian to address that in the conclusion, but I might just wind up the meeting now. I'll ask Sarah if Sarah wanted to say a few words to conclude the meeting.
Well, I have nothing more to say, but I'm not sure if this was mentioned a lot, that I told you that in Indonesia, the Indonesian government has a dual approach to Somali, Sudani, and Myanmar refugees, and even the UNHCR has a dual approach, and organizations talk to them and pay special attention to them. The police doesn't treat them badly, and they're allowed to work, while as Afghans are treated a whole different way. We're always we are just the opposite of them. Like they have the privilege to work, but we don't have the privilege to work. And if some work because they need the money for their family and their expenses, they will be caught and will be jailed in the detention center in the IDC for months because working. And also the religious thing is that we are Shia and living in Indonesia, we have to keep it low key because in Indonesia, the local people are from Sunni side of the religion, and there's a conflict between Shia and Sunni. So like we cannot communicate with the locals, and we should stay low key, because if we don't stay low key about our religion, it might we will face really bad consequences. That's all I wanted to mention.
Okay. Is that another question? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sorry, we're just one more question to Sarah. Just hang on.
Hi, Sarah. I'm Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So my question from you and Mr. Hassan is, what is your advice and what do you want the people in Australia to do? How we can raise your voice, like in which ways we can raise your voice, and how we can deliver your pen, not only your voice, but the people who are in Indonesia, like to Australian government, and what we can do, like what do you want from us? I understand that you guys want us to raise your voice and let the Australian government to lift the ban, but what will be the other things that we can do and provide you more help with it? Thank you.
Okay, on that question, we might conclude the meeting. I'll get Sarah to answer that question and Hassan to make a few comments, and then I'll get Ian to finish the meeting on that question. So Sarah, did you hear that question? Which is really, what would you like us to do?
Well, lifting the ban of the before and after July 2014 is a really big thing. That is one thing. And when I discussed with my fellow refugee activists, they told us that one of the things is that they can help us and help us with the banning, and also that I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but one of the fellow refugees of Makassar told me to mention this too, that in Canada, they're trying to, they made an group that they're helping the refugees to get sponsorship, and we would very much be happy if you could try to do that as well, help by sponsoring some of the refugees from Indonesia. That was one thing one of the fellow refugees mentioned to me, to mention it to you guys.
Okay, Hassan, do you want to say a couple of concluding comments?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, and for the question. There are many things that you people can do, and anyone in the world as a human being. So because human being is not limited to the border or the language or maybe color or something else. Yeah, this is the thing, the biggest thing that you have done now. This meeting is one of those things that you can do to, yeah, find any solution for these people. And you continue this. And the other thing that you are campaigning for the removing the ban, the July ban, that is a big problem that if it is removed, the ban is removed. So there are thousands of refugees that they can have the opportunity to be resettled to Australia as well. And also, as it was mentioned by Sarah, that you can do some sponsorship, make some community sponsorship, just like it is being done by Canada. A group of 5, they are sponsoring the people, and it can be done in Australia as well if that ban is removed first. And that first thing is the removing the ban, July 2014, that you can do. And there are, I think I have read about our immigration quota, migration quota. It was, I think, from 27,000 to went to 195,000, but it's not. It is just for the skilled job visas or any other visa, but not for humanitarian purposes. If that quota is, I think it is given some more quota to Indonesia or to the refugees, Afghan or Hazara refugees here in Indonesia. That can be one of the thing that you can do, campaign for those things. And yes, it was mentioned by Sarah that there is being discriminated between the refugees in Indonesia. Refugees from 2020 and 2022. In this year, there was 114 people from Rohingya refugees came to Aceh this year. They are now under the assistance of IOM. But we people who are living since July 2019 here, it's about 3 years and more than 3 years. We are still here living. We are abandoned and we are left behind. And the IOM says that the fund that came and we gave to Rohingya people is coming from Europe. It's not from Australia. That's why you cannot, because Australia stopped funding us in 2018. So we cannot assist you anymore. We cannot. But at the same time, they are assisting the Rohingya refugees from 2020, 2022. But people from 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, they are living here because they are from Afghanistan. And it was mentioned that because they mostly belong to Hazara Shia, and because there are many other issues here in Indonesia as well that being discriminated, and there are distinctions between these people. Some of them are being well treated, some of them are not treated as an asylum seeker, and they are not being protected, they are not being assisted. Nothing is being done for them. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ian.
Yeah, okay. So just once again, I just wanted to thank Hassan and Sarah for their enormous generosity, for hosting us and meeting with us when we were in Indonesia and providing so much information. And I think so much people are much more acutely aware now of the situation in Indonesia because of Hassan and Sarah. And so, Makassar and Jakarta. So great appreciation. And I do hope we'll be able to see you in Australia, perhaps in the not too far distant future. Look, I mean, it's difficult to sum. It's difficult to sum up the thing, but because there are so many details over the, so many other details that affect understanding exactly what is going on. But I do think hopefully it's become a little bit clear about why that ban has to be lifted. Because until that ban is lifted, we're not going to be able to get at any of the other inconsistencies, and they are horrendous inconsistencies which bother people. As you've heard. I mean, the fact that people aren't processed. So people from 2015 aren't processed. They're registered. They've got a card that says they're the UNHCR, it's identity card, but they're not, haven't got refugee status. But as Hassan's just gone over, depending on who they are and when they arrive, that's not the case. It's not consistent across the board about how UNHCR deals with it. Now they hide behind that to some extent because some of it's true, right? If Australia is not going to take Afghans, then there's no point in processing Afghans, expect them to go to Australia. Nonetheless, that's not, if you're sitting in Indonesia, that's not what you see. You see an inconsistency, you see a discrimination, you see the fact that I haven't got a refugee card 2015 or 2016, and someone in 2020 has got one, and that has a real effect. It has a real effect on you personally. It has a real effect on what your options are, as I discussed earlier. The other thing I think is just about, we'll need to go over some things I think about Australia. I mean, it just so happens, that if you look at the Australian government's failure to meet its humanitarian quota from 2019 to 2022, actually it's about 14,000, right? So we could take all the refugees in Indonesia tomorrow and not be any higher, in terms of the number of refugees that should have come to Australia under the existing quota. And the existing quota is appallingly small. It was cut to 13,500, by the Morrison government. It's still 13,500. I said before, hopefully the Labor Party is going to increase that, to 27,000, next year. But the ban has to go. I think is the main issue that we have to take away. I saw many people actually who told the same story, that they arrived in 2013, 2014. UNHCR begged them, IOM begged them, Australian officials begged them, don't get on a boat. Don't get on a boat because you register with UNHCR, we'll process you and we'll get you to Australia legally. You will be in Australia more quickly. Don't take the risky boat. People are drowning at sea. They're risky, you may not get to Australia. Register with the UNHCR, you will get to Australia. 2014, 2013. One family I know actually is 2000. They've been there 22 years, right? 22 years. So, okay, well, yeah, it's a horrendous story. So, they said, and all of them said the same thing. We believed Australia, we believed the UNHCR, we did the right thing, and we're betrayed. That's the stark reality. So I think we need to go from this meeting. I said it's like probably the first meeting in terms of actually report back about the situation in Indonesia. There'll be more. There'll be fact sheets. I wouldn't usually do it, but actually there's an article in the Solidarity magazine, but just a 2-page article that I did about Indonesia. People can either buy the magazine, or can have a look at it online to get some basic information, but there'll be more fact sheets that will be produced for people to get that kind of information. So I think it is one of the reasons I said before that we are going to try and push up the question of ending the ban and the IOM allowance are going to be two of the issues I think that are going to be a bigger feature of the refugee campaign as we go forward. I should have said also at the beginning that half the people in Indonesia are Afghan, but The next biggest group is probably Iranians, and it's Pakistanis, Rohingyas, Iraqis, Sudanese, and Somalis. You've got the same. There are people from all around the world are in Indonesia because for the same reason, that we've seen them. Why people are going on boats, why they need, why they need, protection. So I think our demand, has to be, lift the ban so the people who are stuck in Indonesia, the people who've been part of the border protection regime that Australia imposed so long ago. Like we said before, for the same reason offshore detention has got to go, the ban's got to go, the people in Indonesia should be brought, to Australia in the same way the people in Nauru and Manus should be brought. We just had that discussion after the meeting, Lorraine. I think I'll just wind up the meeting now, and I'll thank Sarah and Hassan for speaking, and for Ian. And for people here, there is a leaflet on the table there. Lift the ban now. It's got a little bit of information. There is an online petition, so that's a place to start. The Refugee Action Collective in Sydney and in Melbourne on the 5th of December are having a joint Zoom face-to-face meeting, I believe, going over this issue, and we'll be able to join that via the internet. And so, we can help what we want to do, I suppose. We want that to be a good meeting. So if people can help promote that and get other people involved, that would be very good. If people are not on the Refugee Action Collective mailing list, they should do. Again, we've got on this leaflet, it's one of those QR codes. If people don't have the technology to be able to use a QR code and want to sign the petition, we could probably organise something to do it through somebody else's phone or app later on. And just another announcement is on in Canberra on November the 29th, Tuesday the 29th, outside Parliament House, there's going to be a convergence. Refugees will be coming from all over Australia, heading to Canberra, and they'll be raising the issue of they want Labor to live up to its commitment to give permanent protection to TPV holders and people on Chev visas. That's meant to be Labor Party policy, but they haven't implemented it yet. And but it's not just about those people. There's also a whole host of other people who were also on Nauru and Manus Island. Will be, the demands are to give permanency for all refugees. So that's rallies happening in Canberra. So if there's any chance you can get to Canberra, by all means do so. But again, you can publicise those sorts of things. So on that note, I think we'll conclude the meeting. And thanks to everybody for coming. And there's tea and coffee over there if you want to sit around and have some more informal discussion. Thank you. Thanks, thanks, Hassan. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye.